Good morning. Thank you all for taking time out to be part of our Veritas Virtual Executive Summit today. We have a power-packed day for you with a lot of interesting insights and a lot of findings through some of the research that we have done recently, a lot of product-related updates, and a little more excitement on top of that too as we take you through the day. And hopefully you will have a lot of takeaways at the end of the day and find it extremely productive. First of all, let me also thank you for the business that you've given us in last financial year. We're just embarking the new year with this executive summit, and I can tell you I cannot be more excited than where I am today, given the state of the business and the state of the market in spite of the pandemic. And thank you all for the support in what has been an otherwise difficult year. So without any further ado, let me jump into the keynote session, which is on the ID complexity and ransomware research report that we have recently done. This is a research that we did across three major geographies: Americas, EMEA, and APJ, and India very much being part of the APJ. So let me take you through what are the findings that we found, and what are the various challenges that respondents say are part of the ecosystem today. And I'm sure at the end of this there will be a lot of takeaways for you, given the Indian context more importantly in the survey. So let me take you through the research methodology to begin with. We did this research at the end of September, 2020. So you can say that a lot of the pandemic, at least the phase one, has been baked into the survey. The challenges that senior ID executives faced worldwide very clearly is baked into this survey. I'm sure the way things are, there is a lot more challenges being faced today. So, but that said, this should give us a good preview on the changes that are happening in the ID environment and the complexity when it comes to the pandemic era that we are living in. And in terms of the size of the survey, more than we have chosen companies, we have chosen 3,000 senior executives who responded, but more importantly, we have chosen companies with employee size of 1,000 plus across 21 countries for the survey. As you can see, maximum respondents were in EMEA and Asia Pacific, which makes it more relevant for the India context as well. So let me take you through the key findings in the survey from a first cut standpoint. So when you look at the Indian context in the survey, clearly it comes across that the cloud adoption has accelerated in the last 1 year in the pandemic, which is something that I think all of us are anyways seeing as we speak today. But along with the cloud adoption, we are also seeing increased IT complexity. Now 63% of the companies saying that they are Indian companies, saying that they are storing all a part of their data on the cloud, and 41% of that 63% are saying that they have adopted the hybrid cloud strategy. And on an average, Indian companies have about 6 odd cloud service providers, while the number 6 may look big or small, but it is definitely less than the global average. And when we say 6, we are also talking about PaaS and SaaS, apart from the infrastructure services that typically we talk about. So that's the first set of data coming out of the survey. The second set of data is also saying that the Indian companies are paying a price for not being sufficiently resilient, especially when it comes to the security measures. So you can see that 45% of the senior ID professionals are saying that security measures haven't kept pace with the cloud acceleration or adoption. So that is a very key data. We will leave it there. We will come back to that with more analysis later on in the subsequent slides. And to add to that, 77% of the companies faced ransomware attacks, and on an average there were 7 attacks. Now the 7 attacks is much higher than the global average, which you would also see in the subsequent slides, and the 77% also is a much higher number as compared to the global average. But this is something that we are seeing consistently through the last year and the beginning of this year, that India is probably somewhere in the zone of most number of ransomware attacks that are happening globally. And the next data is probably even more startling when companies say that 77% of Indian respondents said that the company paid part or full of the ransom. So we'll leave that park there at the moment, but more importantly, in terms of remediation or in terms of protecting themselves, only 38% of the companies follow the 3-2-1 best practice for backup and recovery. So the typical 3-copy stuff that we do with one offsite, hardly 38% of the companies follow that practice. And many of them, or at least majority of them, said it will take more than 5 days to recover from an attack, and 22% of the company's data they believe may not be recoverable in due course of time. So, so this is the first cut data. We will analyze this a little more as we go along. So let's go through the detailed research findings. So let's talk about security first, the vulnerability first, and see what the respondents are saying. So 45% of the senior IT executives in India are very clear that the IT security measures have not kept pace with the current happenings, either in the form of cloud adoption, increased ransomware attacks, etc., etc. So security and vulnerability is a key concern amongst Indian companies. However, we do fare better than the global average or the APJ average, where 42% said that their security measures are keeping pace, whereas in India we are saying 55%, and the global average there is 36%. So there is some good news there, but at the same time there is a lot of remediation that needs to be done, especially from a security standpoint. So if you look at the concerns, let's double click into the vulnerabilities and the concerns. So India, 43% of the respondents are worried about external attacks. Those are the concerns, and 37% are worried about the internal attacks. And also 37% are worried about the data time management. Whereas when you look at the global data, as you see down there, 32% of the respondents are worried about the data loss scenario, which typically follows a ransomware attack or any security breach that we are referring to these days. So this gives you an idea of what's keeping them awake at night from an over complexity standpoint and a vulnerability standpoint. So moving on to the spend, what are we doing about it as Indian companies? Are we increasing our IT spend? Are we increasing our security spend? So this slide clearly throws light into that. The good news is there is increased spending. Almost 59% of the companies in India said they are increasing their IT spending during COVID to keep pace, and 29% of them said that the spending is more or less on similar lines as compared to the previous year. A small fraction, 13%, not a small fraction, a little more than that, 13% said that the IT spending has decreased. So overall we see the trend towards increased IT spending, and especially I'm sure on the lines of security and on the lines of a lot of other areas that we are seeing this spend, but clearly security budgets have gone up in India or have been kept the same. So let's talk about the complexity now. We spoke about security, we spoke about vulnerability, and we saw what the results say from the survey. Let's talk about the ID complexity. So as I said in the first on the first opening slide, 41% of enterprises, Indian enterprises, have adopted hybrid multi-cloud strategy. Let's see where they store the data and what's the mix of data that they have today. So you can see that 15% of them keep the data completely on-premise, no cloud, whereas almost 21% of them are mostly on-premise, have a cloud strategy but partial, and 41% of them have an equal mix between a public and a private cloud, and 17% of them mostly on public cloud with very little in-house, and the small percentage, 5%, is all public cloud, which kind of compares with APJ and global average. However, the number of cloud service providers in India, as you can see, as I mentioned before, 6 in number. What we saw in the APJ is about 10 cloud service providers, and in global about 12. And this includes obviously the PaaS and SaaS vendors as well. So clearly, I think the number of cloud service providers is only going to increase over a period of time in India, and we can assume that the complexity associated with data management and security, vulnerability, etc., is only going to go up over a period of time as you have more and more of these cloud service providers or partners whom you're going to sign up with for either your key applications or infrastructure. So let us look at how secure is this data and what is the kind of survey results saying there. So when you look at the number of copies, which is very typical, what Indian customers maintain, 3+ copies, you see that about 52% of them do maintain 3+ copies, and 38% of them maintain close to 3 copies, which is kind of healthy. But yeah, definitely we are lagging behind APJ and global average in that sense, where 48% of the respondents from APJ said that they have the 3 copies, and 49% of the global respondents also said that they have 3 copies, one maintained offsite. So this clearly suggests that there is a little bit of catch up that everybody needs to do, especially in this area where ransomware attacks are on the rise, and the solid strategy that you can have against that is to ensure that you have copies which are offsite and which probably are not vulnerable to these attacks which are happening in a frequent basis now. So let's see in terms of the cloud services and how the various geos are performing there. As I said, India is about 6 cloud service providers on an average, which our customers responded to, and APJ global being higher. And if you look at the data recovery per se, and in terms of the DR itself, in terms of hot versus cold versus virtual, how Indian companies are faring vis-a-vis APJ and global. And I will also take you through the data of how frequently we test to check for whether we can recover in case of a disaster. You can see that the Indian companies have about 57% of hot site recovery, whereas globally it's about 51 and 50. The virtual machine recovery is a lot higher in APJ and global as compared to India. India, the response we got is about 4%, whereas in APJ and global is about 17 and 18%. So clearly, with a lot more lot more cloud adoption and a lot more virtual machines that we have today, this is something that needs to go up in due course of time, and I'm pretty sure that we will see those that piece of data going up. And also in terms of the data recovery testing, we are lagging behind. As you can see the screen there, 45% is what our respondents said they have tested in the last 3 months, as compared to the percentage being about 55% in APJ and about 60% worldwide. So clearly this is an area where we need to catch up, given the vulnerabilities and the challenges and the risks that we carry in this increased complex world where our data is across multiple sites and on the cloud. The need for data recovery testing should be higher than before. So there is a gap here, which I'm pretty sure most companies must be trying to address as we speak. Let's talk about survey findings on ransomware and the data loss scenario. So as you can see here, as I mentioned in the opening slide, the number of attacks in India, average number of attacks, is much higher as compared to APJ and the global average. We have about 7 attacks for a corporation in India as compared to a 4.9 average in APJ and 4.5 globally. So, and 77% of the respondents in India said they faced at least one attack, which is a fairly large number as compared to 45% in APJ and 42% globally. So this is well above average, and clearly ransomware is an area where Indian companies need to do a lot more, given that there seems to be some focus on this, especially on our geography. So, and if you look at companies paying part or all of the ransom, again, 43% of them said that they paid the full ransom after the attack, and 34% said they paid part of the ransom, and 34% said they denied paying any ransom to the attackers. So numbers across APJ more or less up or down, and across global too, but you can see that the global average in terms of the ones who paid full ransom and the India percentage seems to be very similar in that sense. So again, an interesting slide on the ransomware and the post complexity of ransomware. So in terms of the challenges to recover from a ransomware attack, majority of the enterprises believe that it takes more than 5 days. My personal experience has been much more than that, but nevertheless it says it takes more than 5 days. More than 5 could be 10, 15, 18, but it's more than 5 days that it would take to recover from one such attack. And as we saw earlier, even in terms of data loss, 22% of the data most respondents said will not be recoverable post the attack. So you can see the split here in terms of India, APJ and global, in terms of how long it takes for a recovery and what is the opinion that most respondents have. But you can see majority are hinged towards the more than 5 days. So clearly there is a data loss scenario, there is a complexity, this takes a long time to recover, which increases the pressure on IT and the business itself to kind of recover from this attack, which is clear as part of this data as well. If you double click into this and see which are the files and which kind of data is impacted by the ransomware attacks, you can see the mix here in terms of India and the global geographies in terms of which impact to the file and impact to the data. So you can see that about 0 to 9%. Looking at the business disruptions from ransomware attacks, we've been talking about the data loss scenario, we've been talking about how long it takes to recover as well, and you can see that there is a significant business disruption post attack, and these are the data that is coming out from the survey, which says that 43% believe less than a day, 14% believe that it takes 1 to 4 days, and 43% believe it takes 5 days or more to recover. So I think this is a little more granular than what we spoke about earlier in terms of data. So this should give you a clear idea of what is the impact of ransomware attacks, impact of increased complexity as we adopt more and more cloud, security concerns around keeping abreast with complexity, which is further complexity which is being created in our environment. With all this, protecting the data and the ability to manage the data is becoming more and more challenging as days go by. So trust Veritas, leader in global information management, leader, the #1 market shareholder in the backup and recovery space globally. 87% of the Fortune 500 rely on Veritas for the same. More than 80,000 customers globally, 20,000 partners. So we have the platform to take care of all these complexities and challenges, and this is what we do for a living. We ensure that in spite of all this challenges that you have, either you adopt cloud or increase your on-prem, or you have a SaaS and you increase adoption, we ensure that your data is protected come what may. So we ensure that you have a strategy in place, you have the necessary tools and technologies to back that up, and you have the necessary implementation services through us and our wide range of partners who are there to help satisfy all those needs. So it has been a difficult year from a ransomware standpoint. We saw many of our customers going through pain. There are a few things that you can do today, which is something you can do today without any investment. But if you need a little more, I would say, ongoing strategy and something that is more concrete, there are various ways and means by which you can protect this data in this increasingly complex world, which the team will talk about today, and hopefully you will have some more takeaways on that side too, apart from many other areas that we will talk about today. So with that, it brings me to the end of this keynote. Thank you everyone for a patient hearing, and I hope you have a fantastic day today. Thank you once again for taking time out to join us on this Veritas Virtual Executive Summit, and I look forward to catching up with you during the day as well. Thank you.